Hi, and welcome to the Flex with Aaliyah. Today I'm talking about travel. A lot of the times we travel for races that are local, but there are times that we are going across the country, changing time zones, flying internationally. How do you handle your nutrition, recovery, preparation for a race while managing that travel? And that's what I'm talking about today. So thank you for tuning in. Remember to like, subscribe, share. I'm going to kick things off with a funny. It's not a quote, it's just something funny. Running to the boarding gate is my favorite workout. And I just like this quote because it has to do with travel. And I'm specifically talking about travel that's far enough that you're flying to, not driving to. Granted, you could probably drive anywhere across the country, it just take you a longer time. So it's doable. But we're talking about more so travel via plane. So let's just start talking with timing. If I know I'm going to the West Coast, somewhere to the West, where my time now goes behind, I'm located on the East Coast. And if I'm traveling to California, and that's a 3 hour difference, come dinner time at 5 on the East Coast, it's 2 p.m. And I'm like, ooh, I might not be ready to eat dinner. How am I handling that time challenge? Well, for me, and what I would recommend is try to stay on your schedule. So I might be eating at 2, but my body's used to eating at 5. I could push it back maybe an hour or so, but I want to try to stay on my routine and go to bed early because usually if I'm flying to California, it's just for a short period of time. I don't need to recalibrate and go super early to adjust to the time difference. Probably arriving Friday, racing Saturday. Bing, bang, boom, and then flying out Saturday night or Sunday. So I don't need too much adjustment. I want to stay on my schedule, get as much sleep as possible, wake up. I might be up a little bit earlier, and that's fine because I can eat, digest, get a solid warm up stretch in before I have to show up to the race. That is how I handle West Coast in the United States. So if I'm going to Chicago or Texas or all the way to the West Coast, I'm trying to maintain my current schedule. If I lived on the West Coast and was traveling to the East Coast, I would want to slightly modify my schedule because now they're ahead. So I'm used to it's 5 p.m. on the West Coast, but it's really 8 p.m. on the East Coast. I don't want to just be eating dinner now. I want to be powering down, getting ready to go to bed, reviewing the race plans, whatever. So I want to try to get on an East Coast schedule, maybe just by like an hour or so I can go to bed on time and feel refreshed in the morning. If I stay on that West Coast schedule, I might wake up a little groggy, be a little tight, irritable, hungry, something like that. So I want to modify appropriately. It doesn't have to be super significant, like change it by 3 hours, but maybe an hour or so. That was my recommendation if you're traveling in the United States from one time zone to the next. Now, if I was traveling internationally, and that's usually over 5 hours, I definitely want to modify my schedule. I've raced in the UK a couple times, and I've definitely had to change things up. Actually, I remember sleeping so much throughout the day. I tried adjusting my schedule, but my body just wasn't taking to it. It took me a couple days. So when I'm going internationally and if there's a big time change, like 7 hours, even 5, I try to get on that time zone schedule as quick as possible. I might not feel sleepy or hungry at the times that country is operating on, but I need to start operating on it. And a good tip or rule of thumb that I use, I try to go a couple days in advance. Now, if I had oodles of time, maybe I'd go a week in advance, but that's not always realistic. So 3 days, sometimes it's been two, but I try to get there 3 days, 2 days beforehand so I can really adjust to the time schedule. I might still feel tired or groggy 2 days later, but that first day after travel, you're probably just going to be tired. And then the next day, you're like, oh, everything feels off. I'm hungry and it's 1 a.m. I'm tired and it's 2 p.m. When I traveled to Nepal, the flight was really long and I had to significantly adjust eating and sleep schedule. The first night, arrived during the day in the afternoon, passed out maybe at like 7 p.m., woke up at midnight, so hungry, had to order a room service. So I tried to get on that schedule, but it didn't really work out for the first day. And the next day it was off a little bit as well, but then things got rolling, so you kind of just had to jump into it. The more active I am in the plan, so let's say I have a race, I gotta go to this store, I have an activity that I'm doing. The more I am on a schedule and moving, it's easier for my body to adjust. If I'm just resting, being casual, staying in the hotel room, it's harder for me to make those adjustments. Because if I'm up, I'm obviously not going to nap or sleep because I'm out doing things. So that is my tip. If you're traveling very far for a race, get out and do things. You don't need to like run and crazy work out, especially if you're traveling for a race. Just move. Maybe go on a tour, walk around, see the local architecture, sample some food. Things like that helps you acclimate so much better. That's my recommendation for getting used to the sleeping habits. Eating, same thing. You kind of want to start to function on that time schedule. It won't be a perfect science, but the sooner you make those small adjustments, the easier it will be. Now, you might not have to. You can eat at weird times. But if you're staying at a hotel where they only serve meals at certain times, you need to get up and start functioning that way. Otherwise, you can go out, get your own food, and handle it that way. I remember when I was in Belgium for an event, I actually would go to a grocery store and I was staying at an Airbnb. So I was making my food. I felt like I was hungry a lot just because I would eat due to having an event. So I needed the fuel, but I wasn't necessarily hungry. And then I would get hungry and I would eat because I was hungry. So it's like this funny mix. And the best way to combat that is to try to adjust your schedule, but don't fight it so much, especially when it comes to your nutrition and hydration for an event. You need that fuel. So there are going to be times where you have to force yourself to eat something. You recognize that you got up earlier, your race is in 5 hours, you're not really hungry, but now you can have more of a full breakfast. So that is my recommendation when you're traveling across the country or internationally. Figure out where you're going. What is the time difference? Is it 3 hours, 1 hour, 2, 16? Obviously, the shorter time change is a lot easier to adjust to. You might not even need to do anything. Assess that first. Pay attention to your race details. What time does the race start? What time would that be for you where you're from? Do you need to adjust your eating schedule based on that information? The more information you have, the better you can handle and assess your travel. So that concludes this episode. It's super short and sweet because you get up, you go, you run to the gate because you don't want to miss your plane. That little boost of anxiety, stress, and adrenaline trying to get to the plane always makes for an interesting flight. Don't make that your best workout. Make your race your best workout by doing your due diligence and preparing ahead of time. Look up the race information, assess the time change, and how your body functions. If you're not used to travel, the first time you do it, you're going to know right away. and you're going to store that information and build off of it the next time you travel internationally or across the country. So stay on top of it, get your sleep, get your fuel in, and you're going to kick ass. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Flex with Aaliyah, and I'll catch you next time. Remember, like, subscribe, share, and of course, stay flexy. Extra flexy if you're racing. Ha!